Once upon a time, in a quiet kingdom where cherry blossoms fell like pink snow in the spring, there lived a girl named Cinderella. She had a heart as gentle as the doves that perched on her windowsill, and a smile that made even the gloomiest morning seem bright. Her mother had been a woman of warmth and kindness, a mother who taught her that grace was found not in riches but in patience. Yet, as all mortal lives must, hers came to an early end. The day she passed, the world felt dimmer, and the little girl's laughter fell silent for the first time. Her father, a respected merchant, did his best to fill their home with joy once again. But loneliness crept in through the empty halls. In time, he married again, a woman of noble birth but cold ambition. She brought with her 2 daughters, both spoiled by vanity and self-importance. At first they smiled sweetly, hiding their jealousy behind delicate lace and soft words. But when the father was called away on business and never returned, when the news came that he had fallen ill and died far from home, the smiles of her new family vanished completely. From that day onward, Cinderella became a servant in her own house. Morning after morning, she rose before dawn to fetch water, stoke fires, and sweep the halls. Her stepmother and stepsisters called her lazy if she ever paused, ugly if she ever smiled, foolish if she ever hoped. She had once worn ribbons and silks. Now she wore gray linen and soot-stained skirts. It was there that the mice began to visit her, clever, twitchy little creatures that scurried for crumbs but lingered for her kindness. She spoke to them softly, giving them names and tiny bits of bread. Birds would often join, fluttering through her window to perch on the rafters. In them she found companionship, and in their songs she remembered her mother's voice. And yet, despite her endless toil, she never grew bitter. Every dawn she whispered to herself, "Have courage and be kind." One crisp morning, when the air was bright and alive with the promise of spring, trumpets echoed across the kingdom. Royal messengers rode through every street, posting scrolls on every door and shouting the words that would soon change Cinderella's life forever. The king invites all young maidens of the realm to a grand royal ball. The prince himself shall choose a bride. Cinderella paused at the well, bucket in hand, as villagers around her cheered. For a brief, fleeting moment, hope stirred inside her chest. At home, however, hope was mocked. The stepsisters shrieked with excitement, rushing about in a storm of fabric and jewels. "He will surely choose me," cried one. "No, me," screeched the other. The stepmother looked upon her daughters proudly, imagining crowns and courtly influence. And Cinderella, she sewed their dresses, polished their shoes, and brushed their hair while they insulted her every movement. When the night of the ball finally arrived, she helped them into their gowns, tying ribbons and fastening pearls, her own reflection in the mirror behind them pale and hidden beneath a veil of ash. As their carriage rolled away, laughter echoing down the street, Cinderella stood by the doorway, alone. She could hear the distant music already drifting from the castle, violins, laughter, the sounds of a world she was forbidden to touch. Her heart ached. "If only I could go," she whispered to the empty kitchen, "just once, to see the lights, to hear the music, to feel free." Tears fell silently into the ashes. Then, quite suddenly, the firelight flickered. A shimmer passed through the air like moonlight reflected on water. Cinderella lifted her head in surprise. Before her eyes, a swirl of soft gold light gathered in the center of the room. It rose and twisted like wind, forming the shape of a woman, elegant, radiant, with a smile that glowed as warm as the hearth itself. "Why are you crying, my dear?" asked the woman. Her voice was like sunlight after rain. Cinderella stammered, I wanted to go to the ball, but..." The fairy smiled knowingly. "But they would not let you. And yet you helped them with kindness. You deserve one night of wonder." Raising her wand, the fairy pointed toward the garden. "Fetch me a pumpkin." Puzzled but trusting, Cinderella ran to the yard and rolled the largest pumpkin she could find inside. With a twirl of her wand, the fairy godmother transformed it into a gleaming golden carriage. Next, she gestured to the mice hiding under the table. In flashes of light, they became 6 white horses. The old gray cat yawned from the corner. In a blink, he stood tall and proud as a coachman dressed in green velvet. Cinderella gasped in astonishment. "Now," said the fairy gently, "you must look the part of a princess." With another graceful wave, sparks drifted down like snowflakes, landing upon Cinderella's tattered dress. The threads shimmered, mending and weaving into a gown of silver and sky-blue silk. Jewels blossomed like stars at her hem, and in her hair appeared a delicate crystal tiara. Finally, the fairy knelt, touching her wand to Cinderella's bare feet. Glass slippers appeared, fragile as light, yet unbreakable. Cinderella looked down, tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. "Oh, thank you," the fairy smiled. "But remember, child, the spell will fade at midnight. You must return before the final stroke of 12. Cinderella nodded eagerly, stepping into the carriage. The horses neighed, the wheels turned, and off she went into the moonlit night. The castle stood at the edge of the city like a dream made of marble and glass. Its towers shimmered under thousands of lanterns, and the scent of roses floated through the air. Inside, the ballroom was alive with color and laughter. Gowns swirled, jewels sparkled, and music filled every corner. Yet among all the finery, the prince looked weary, polite but distant. Then the great doors opened, every head turned. Cinderella entered, her gown catching the light like liquid silver. The musicians faltered for a breath. The prince froze, eyes fixed upon her. He stepped forward and bowed. "May I have this dance?" She curtsied softly, her voice trembling. "Yes, Your Highness." As they danced, the crowd faded. The chandeliers gleamed above like constellations. The orchestra rose in harmony, and for a few precious moments, Cinderella forgot every sorrow she had ever known. The prince smiled for the first time in years. "Tell me your name," he asked. But Cinderella only shook her head. "Perhaps another time." Then faintly, one chime. Her heart dropped. She turned toward the clock tower as it struck again. And again. Midnight. "I must go!" she cried. The prince reached out, startled. "Wait, please!" But she was already running, her gown glimmering as it began to fade. The ballroom blurred behind her. Down the marble stairs she flew, losing one glass slipper upon the steps. By the time the last bell tolled, the carriage was gone, the gown was rags once more, and Cinderella stood breathless in the cold night, the echo of music fading behind her. In her heart, though, there was no despair. She smiled softly and whispered, "At least for one night, I was free." The next morning, the kingdom buzzed with news. The prince had found a glass slipper, small, delicate, and shining with magic. He declared he would marry the one whose foot fitted perfectly. From town to town, the royal guard carried the slipper, knocking on every door. Every noblewoman and peasant girl alike tried, but none could wear it. Finally, they reached the stepmother's manor. The sisters nearly trampled one another in their rush. They squeezed, they pushed, they wailed, but the slipper would not fit. As the prince turned to leave, a quiet voice spoke from the corner. "May I try?" Cinderella stepped forward. Her clothes were humble, her face calm. The stepmother laughed sharply. "You? A servant?" But the prince, gazing at her eyes, felt something stir, a faint memory of the girl from the ball. He nodded. Let her try. Cinderella knelt. The slipper slid on effortlessly, as though it had been waiting for her all along. A golden light filled the room, and in that instant, her rags transformed once again into her beautiful gown. The stepsisters gasped, their faces pale. The prince fell to one knee. "It was you, all along." Within days, the bells of the kingdom rang out in joy. The royal carriage arrived at the manor not for the stepmother's daughters, but for Cinderella. The prince helped her inside, and they rode together to the palace where sunlight gleamed upon banners and roses. The king and queen welcomed her warmly. "You have given our son his smile back," said the queen, embracing her. And when the wedding came, the entire kingdom rejoiced. The streets were filled with laughter, the sky with confetti of flower petals. The stepsisters, trembling, came before her, ashamed and tearful. Cinderella simply smiled. "You are forgiven. Let's begin anew." Even her stepmother bowed her head, unable to speak. Cinderella's kindness had triumphed, not through power, but through grace. Years later, the palace was filled with laughter, songs, and gardens overflowing with life. The people adored their gentle queen, who never forgot her humble beginnings. She often visited the poor, sharing food and clothes, always reminding her servants, kindness is the truest form of magic. Sometimes at twilight, she would stand on the palace balcony, looking out at the distant hills, where long ago she had once gathered pumpkins and whispered her dreams to the stars. The prince would join her there, hand in hand, and they would smile as the bells rang softly across the valley. And on clear nights, if one listened closely, a faint sparkle of magic could still be heard in the breeze, the laughter of a fairy godmother watching from afar, proud of the girl who had turned ashes into light. And they lived happily ever after.